Yeah, we need a quorum, right?
Yeah, we should.
I guess we don't have to.
I have to, but it's so odd. Is somebody sending texts?
Yeah, I am.
Good, thank you.
And Susie, you said you texted Jared, so he knows.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I use the right text.
Yeah, I think he only has one number that he uses, I believe.
Hopefully I use the right one.
So just all I do is plug a roll here, then I'm off my and I'm right now, so you won't have to worry about anything.
Who's your meeting starting?
Yeah, it starts at 5, but like I said, yeah, but no need to worry about anything, is what I'm saying. I don't know. Delicia's here.
Oh, awesome. Hi, you're with us. Okay. There she is. Good. Okay. Talisha Casey, me, one more. There's Cindy. Okay. The boys are missing. This session of the Tacoma Park City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Stewart,
Here.
Councilmember Kovar,
Here.
Councilmember Dabala,
Present.
Councilmember Kostick,
Here.
Councilmember Siemens, Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Searcy,
Here.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining this evening. Like last week, we're holding a meeting from 5 to 6:30 in which we will receive 2 presentations. One is our check-in on our COVID-19 response, and then we will have a presentation on assessment of park quality, accessibility, and race. This is a presentation we were supposed to have last week, but unfortunately the weather got in the way. So we're doing.
That's a different one.
That was a different one. Okay, sorry. That one we haven't done yet. This is this one. Okay, getting confused. All right, scratch that. But we are having those 2 presentations. So we will be meeting for the next hour and a half, and then take a dinner break and come back at 7:30. The agenda is up on the city website if folks want to take a look at it. And so that we have enough time, I'm going to turn it quickly over, I think, to Grace Wiggins and Samira Cook Gaines to start their presentation. And we want to thank them so much. I know you all have been working around the clock to join us this evening to give us this update. So it's all yours.
And I'll start out just one moment, if I might, Mayor. We are going to have a presentation from the housing manager and economic development manager on our COVID-19 fund initiatives. During the budget process, $634,000 was set aside by council going from FY20 into FY21 to deal with COVID relief. And so we do have a presentation that's kind of an update from the May presentation with the budget. I would like to ask the council members to wait to the end of the presentation for questions if we can, because we could spend a lot of time on this, and I want to make sure that we cover the major points. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Grace Wiggins. Or Samira, whichever.
Sure. Okay, now that I'm off of the mute. So thank you, Susie, and thank you to the members of the City Council for inviting us back to talk a little bit about the updates since last we were together. And so this slide presentation is going to begin with giving housing updates, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Samira Cook-Gaines, who will then give updates on COVID-19 related assistance to small businesses. And so let me kick it off by saying that this is uncharted territory, not just for the city of Tacoma Park, but for our county, our state, and for our country. And so it's taken a lot of time for us to kind of figure out what the plans are moving forward. As the council may be aware, there have been a lot of twists and turns, a lot of money discussed outside of our COVID-19 fund. And so tonight will be an opportunity for me to give an update on what we know now, what we've been doing since last we met with you, and maybe even to reiterate some of what we discussed during the comprehensive presentation that we made in May. Next slide, please. So the county is really the leader in terms of getting information to us and to others about what they believe to be is the delinquency among our tenants. And so there have been estimates that over 20,000 households currently are delinquent in rent payments. And so that's a moving target based on a number of factors. And so we've tried to stay kind of close to the ground, both with the county and with other key stakeholders, to ensure that we have a good feel for what's going on here in the city of Tacoma Park. I'll share with you all and with the residents of the city. Since about March the 11th, we've received at least between 10 to 15 calls a day. And I didn't include weekends because they have occurred during weekends as well, from residents who have reached out to our office to get a better feel for how they can be assisted. And as I explained in May, many of the folks that we're getting calls from, even now, are residents who are struggling around barriers. Barriers with employment and unemployment insurance, barriers around figuring out how to pay other bills. And as I mentioned in the May presentation, many of our families, even those that are in rent stabilized units, have significant obligations in other areas of their lives. And so rent is one of many things that they're struggling with. And the devastation of this health pandemic has really placed them in a situation where they've had to make some very real decisions about what they pay first and what they do. The city, in allocating this COVID-19 money, really made a bold step in a variety of areas. Number one, it gave us a pot of money to begin planning around, and for rental housing especially, nothing has really happened of significance. The court presently is in phase 3 of the reopening of the judicial system here in the state of Maryland, and Montgomery County is slightly behind the deadlines and the timelines that have been established, but I'll talk about that later. But I think it's important to know that nothing significant has happened in Montgomery County to start removing tenants. And more importantly, there have been a number of significant dollars that have been focused on eviction prevention. Some of those dollars have come from the federal government, some have come from the state, and then obviously the county has made a number of allocations and appropriations to try to deal with the impending what's been called a tsunami of eviction cases that will occur once the courts are fully open. And so I think it's important to put that into context. And I would welcome the invitation to come back in probably 3 months to try to give the council a better feel for what residential residents are experiencing, because I think we're a little too early to give a comprehensive update. And when the courts resume, and I'll share a little of that timeline with you in the next several slides, you will understand what that means. And so the plan was to have a plan. And so the city of Tacoma Park has really been, and through the COVID-19 funding, has really been ahead of the curve in terms of at least thinking about the allocation of dollars that will be used and how they will be used. And in kind of working within HCD, the idea behind the idea behind what those allocations look like and how we plan to help people was really important. We didn't want to miss any key stakeholder groups, and a plan is really designed to prepare us for what I've explained to be a tsunami that will come down the road. From stakeholders who are a little bit closer, we've learned that the courts may not even have the capacity moving forward to adjudicate the majority of the rent delinquency cases, what are known as failure to pay rent cases, because their capacity is limited as well, and there's a backlog that existed even before the health, this health pandemic occurred. And so it's important for the council as well as our residents to know that everything that we do is a coordinated effort around the larger dollars and the bigger players. And by that, I mean, the lead is always going to be from the county. And even before COVID, the city of Tacoma Park, through its council, has allocated dollars for emergency assistance. And we've always relied on the dollars of the county to take the lead. And so, for example, anyone facing eviction, we always sent them and will continue to send them to the Department of Health and Human Services because their pot is always larger. And where we've been effective on behalf of our citizenry is around supplementing. And so the dollars that have been allocated are really those to supplement what the county will either be able to bring forth by the Department of Health and Human Services and some other agencies that have gotten involved. But I want it to be clear that we will never take the lead. So folks coming to our office we assess to figure out if there are barriers, but definitely if there is a direct need for housing assistance, those folks are sent to Health and Human Services so that they can be assessed. Next slide, please. And so I want to give you a quick update on the administrative orders that are in place, because I think that's going to be incredibly helpful to put this into context. So there are two administrative orders, one that's called a resumption order and one that's called an eviction order. And that resumption order has come from the Chief Judge of the state of Maryland, and it really outlines how the courts will resume operations and in what order. And then the second is an eviction order. I think for the sake of time and brevity, I think focusing on what Montgomery County is doing in terms of how they will reopen, we're not going to begin to see cases scheduled before August the 31st. And those will represent cases that were initiated prior to March 16th through July 20th, as the slide states. And so that will then give us an opportunity to at least figure out what our timing will be around the implementation of some of the other work that we want to do. And it should be noted that residents in the city of Tacoma Park have already started being assisted, especially folks who were behind in rent. We strongly encourage them to reach out to the county, and we strongly encourage them to get their rent current. The county's approach, at least in some cases, has been to help folks just so that they can catch up, even if there was not a long-term plan around their ability to maintain the rent going forward. And I think at that point, with that point in mind, I will say our plan in the housing division around COVID-19 is the retention of our residents as a result of COVID-19. And so the county, obviously, as I mentioned, will do some work to try to get people current, but the long-term prospect in terms of folks remaining in their homes may be bleak, because there is so much money that's being thrust into eviction prevention that there just is a need to get that money out. But our dollars are really designed, as I mentioned, to create long-term sustainability and retention in our community. And so we've been working both with landlords, tenants, property managers in a very intensive way, because our city it is kind of comprised of folks that are at different levels. So for our nonprofit housing providers, we've had town hall webinars and conferences with them on Zoom to get a better feel for what they're doing and how we can coordinate our efforts. For our small landlords, we've been working with them to navigate this system and to give them accurate information on what is going to happen in the court system. And that's been very, very important for our small landlords, our mom and pops that have made a commitment to our city. And for our tenants, we've done a series of webinars and have had one-on-one conversations with those residents based on their needs to figure out how we remove barriers and what they can expect moving forward. The one additional point that I want to make, and it may not be completely clear to folks viewing this as well as to our council, is there have been a number of residents that have received something called a notice to vacate. And my team has fielded a number of calls from residents during COVID who've been told on 60 days notice that they must leave. And so we've been in a position to provide those folks with good guidance and recommendations around what, I'm hearing background noise, guidance and recommendations about what they need to do because they have no defense to leaving or to vacating the unit, and we've been helpful in that realm as well. So I think that that's really important to note because there are a number of residents that have had to make very hard decisions about leaving during this health emergency, but also looking for housing. And it's important to footnote the fact that a lot of people are not moving out and have not moved from March to July means that the housing stock has been very limited. And for some of our residents, they've had to make a hard decision about, do I stay and accumulate debt, or do I leave and try to find some alternative housing? So, having that as a new conversation, and we've seen more and more of that during COVID than we expected. Next slide, please. And so I want to break out a little of what we talked about in May, just so that the council has a better feel for how we're addressing the needs of renters and how we're addressing the needs of homeowners. And so in our original proposal and plan, we talked about the expansion of the emergency assistance that's traditionally been $30,000 from the council, and increasing that to $50,000. And so there's a $10,000 increase through this COVID-19 fund that will be used once this process begins to try to help supplement rent for folks. To give you a little more context, so in fiscal year 20, our provider must exhausted the $30,000 allocation or appropriation from council by February. And so we were fortunate to be able to pull from a donation pool that's made up of donated dollars from our residents to close the gap on what we knew would be a very difficult rest of our fiscal year. And so 15,000 additional dollars were put into that pot. So we're expecting that will also be exhausted during this fiscal year. And we've received our final invoice from that vendor, and they've spent down the entire 45,000, both in eviction prevention. And I want to make sure that it's clear that this is not just about eviction prevention. It's a combination of resources that our residents are taking advantage of. And I'll talk a little bit about what we've seen in the past quarter. It's eviction prevention, but that number is shrunk a little just because the courts have been closed. Prescription assistance, which has grown. Many more families have struggled around getting refills on prescriptions and other prescription assistance. And so our provider must has been able to kind of step in and deal with that and help. Literally help by paying for prescriptions to be released. Food, we've seen an uptick. In the past month, our provider has assisted over 22 families with food, and that's in the form of gift cards. On average, those 22 families received $100 each to go to a supermarket to pick out food that they want and need. In the past, our food provider has provided shelf-stable food for families, but in light of COVID, they've switched their model to a gift card model. And so our families have really taken advantage of that. Utility disconnections, as you know, there's been a moratorium on that. And we expect as we move forward that we're going to see a number of disconnections, utility disconnections, once that stay has been lifted. The second part of the plan for assisting renters was around the creation of a rental assistance program. And so for our families that are able to maintain and have the financial wherewithal to remain in their homes, we wanted to provide a boost. And in my original presentation, we talked about serving 250 families. And let me just reiterate how we came up with that number and how we came up with the amount. So we look back at our numbers in terms of the folks that we've assisted in the past, and we've determined that we're probably going to see around 250 folks who will be able to maintain their housing and will be able to continue paying the rent going forward. And this program will be administered by Ministries United Silver Spring Tacoma Park. Our partner, and the acronym is MUST. I think I presented in May and shared that I had already spoken with the executive director of this organization, and the executive director had confirmed with the board of directors of that organization that they had the capacity and wherewithal to assist us and assist families. These folks would go through a vetting, which means that at the point that they were referred for rental assistance, they would be current with their rent, have the ability to pay rent going forward, and that the 3 months in rental assistance would be a boost so that they would be able to remain on track. And I will reiterate, it is the policy of my division to help people, and for our partner MUST to help people who are able to stay in their units.
Ms. Wiggins, I was just wondering if, I wanted to do a time check, if we could.
Sure, thank you.
Move along.
To remain in their units, and that's really the important thing. That's how folks remain stable. And many of the families that we're helping through MUST are folks who have small children under 18, or they're seniors, or folks that are disabled. And we want to make sure that our community is the place where they can remain stable. Next slide, please. And then the second part is assistance to homeowners. And so I mentioned this in May. We must ensure that our common ownership communities, and in the city of Tacoma Park, we have roughly 650 units of condominium housing. And as I explained before, we want to make sure that, as opposed to renters where it's your rent and you're done, or with single family homeowners or folks that aren't living in common ownership communities, that our communities that have HOA fees and where they may see delinquencies, that we're able, through a program that we're going to develop, they're able to get assistance with essential community needs. Several of our common ownership communities are currently struggling, and we've had direct contact with some of those communities, and I've flagged a number of them to come back to us when they have a better feel in terms of the assistance that they can need, that they could use, and also once we have the application process in place so that we can move quickly to help them. And then the second part is assistance to homeowners that are not in federally backed mortgages. I'll take a pause there just to remind the council. So folks who have federally backed mortgages, homeowners in our city, were entitled to a forbearance of 180 days without request. And so for those folks that have the non-federally backed mortgages, we wanted to at least attempt to help. There are a small number of those here in our city, but the numbers reflect that, because we know that the numbers are much smaller than folks who have federally backed mortgages. And the update for council is, for federally backed mortgages, individuals are entitled to 180 days of forbearance without penalty, and then they're entitled to request another 180 days, which means that it will be almost a year that single family, non-common ownership community homeowners will be able to request a forbearance. And that is a significant benefit. And it's also something that homeowners may need in terms of the rebuilding after a 1 year period, almost a 1 year period. And then the last thing I mentioned, which goes without saying, is the personal protective equipment. We've passed out over 250 masks, both purchased and donated to our families. We've also passed out gloves and individual hand sanitizers. The costs for those kinds of PPE are increasing, and we want to try to ensure that folks who need that will have it. And so we put a modest budget of $50,000 to that assistance. Next slide, please. And so this is an outline again from the previous slide from May of where we see this plan going. Again, these are estimates. Once we get into full gear and the courts reopen, we will have a better idea of whether our estimates were correct. But this was based on what we knew at the time and based on the dollars that were allocated for this fund. And so we will continue to keep the council advised as as we move forward. Next slide. And so I want to talk a little bit about the shared resources and webinars that we've conducted. My division has taken not only this process seriously, but also working with existing partners as well as partners that we just didn't have a relationship with before here in the city. I'm sharing this resource list again. This was published in our July newsletter and in our June newsletter. And these resources have also been published on our COVID-19 page on our website. And if you could just go to the top again before you scroll down, Samira. Thank you. So I want to reiterate for our residents and for our council, these are active resources that are available. We've organized them in a way that our residents will be able to, connect with all of our partners. I'll just highlight, we have always had, since the day I walked into the city of Tacoma Park, a relationship with Maryland Legal Aid. They're one of our very close partners, and they have done a lot in our city over the past 18 months, both in person as well as providing brochures on a variety of civil legal topics. And this is a legal provider that only assists low and moderate income residents. And if you scroll down, Samira, we've done presentations with Maryland Legal Aid, and we've also done a total of 8 presentations on topics including foreclosure, wills, powers of attorney, health directives. We've also done a consumer protection presentation. We've done standby guardianship presentations to help our parents of small children, and that includes parents who have families that have mixed immigration status who need to identify a guardian. If you scroll a little bit more, thank you. We've done presentations on garnishment and stimulus check garnishments. We've also done unemployment insurance claims, free tax preparation presentations. And so we've really, IRS disputes, and you can see the list. And again, it's published on our website. And we've worked comprehensively with residents that have approached us around health insurance issues, as well as how to connect with testing sites. And so we've attempted to do the most to help the residents that need this kind of help. And so I'm confident that with these partners and stakeholders that we've just started, building strong relationships that we can rely on here in the city. And more importantly, this is a demonstration of how serious we take this issue and all the barriers that our residents are facing. And so, obviously at the end of the presentation, I would welcome questions. And for our residents who are struggling or have questions about this plan and any part of how we're assisting families, I would love to have that direct conversation with you so that it's clear. But I feel confident that with the partnerships that we've established, the relationships that we had even leading up to COVID, that we have equipped ourselves to help, and we maintain very strong relationships with the county and the state, and really look forward to preserving the housing of both homeowners and renters moving forward. So with that, I'll take a breath and I'll turn over the presentation to Samira Cookings, the Economic Development Manager. So thank you.
Okay, everyone, and am I unmuted?
you're fine. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I am going to kind of pick up where Grace kind of put a pin in some of the spending, and I'm going to talk about some of the spending we've done in economic development to really assist our businesses. And this is the update around spending. Spending is really about being smart and strategic in our timeline and knowing where the other funding and help is going to come from. Takoma Park has committed a substantial amount of funds for COVID-19 response for small businesses. However, as everyone knows, this is a much larger impact on businesses than anyone could ever have imagined. So just to start, response, rebuild, recovery. Response is what we did the minute businesses were closed and we didn't know what the future looked like. Rebuild is what we're doing right now, trying to help businesses move to the next stage and actually operate within a global health crisis. And recovery is probably something that looks about 3 years from today. So starting with response, our most effective response was direct assistance to businesses through our mini grant program, our citywide small business mini grant program. The COVID-19 fund put about $105,000 to complete every single request for help in our mini grant fund. So in an extraordinary kind of response, we literally gave direct assistance to 98% of those who asked for assistance. That was a total of 92 businesses. And we also continue to do outreach and funding to about 550 businesses. So here we are in the rebuild phase. The rebuild phase is actually about, flattening the curve, making sure less people are sick. With that said, I created the Healthy Business Program. And that program had an original estimate of $50,000. The hope for that program was to assist 80 to 100 businesses based on the response we got from the citywide small business mini grant program. The Healthy Business Initiative was really about getting the mandatory PPE to our businesses, mandatory disinfecting and cleaning supplies and assistance, as well as public health signage and virus testing for staff. The minute businesses were able to open, we started seeing issues where the virus was still out there, and therefore our businesses were struggling with virus testing and cleaning. Therefore, our original estimate of $50,000, our current spending for the Healthy Business Program is at about $67,000. That includes the first portion of our direct grants. It includes public health signage, and it includes cleaning supplies. And you'll see here at the bottom, the estimate for the second round, because the plan for this program was to have a beginning and then give a little bit of space to digest, understand what else was needed, and then have a second round. In the second round, we won't be, for example, purchasing public health signage. But what we found out is that our original estimate of $50,000 was absolutely too low. And the main points that really drove this increase were cleaning and PPE. So PPE, two issues here, the cost. So price gouging, and then scarcity. Scarcity, this is basic economics, scarcity drives up the price. So with that said, PPE, gloves, masks, sanitizers are all costing a lot more than what the original estimate was 2 months ago. And our businesses are going through them like water, trying to, stick with the mandate. Additionally, the cost of cleaning supplies, the scarcity, and the cost have definitely gone up. What has gone down is the virus testing for staff. Virus testing, we know in the city, we've had several rounds of testing, pop-up testing set up, and folks are able to pretty much find free testing. There still are a few requests for testing, but folks are able to find that. So the cost of that is definitely going to be lower. However, it is not going to make up for the increased cost of cleaning, disinfecting, and PPE. These other two categories of small business technical assistance and additional assistance. Small business technical assistance is the natural next step once our businesses really do get a handle of what their operations look like. However, much like Grace just mentioned, the county is really working through putting funding into technical assistance providers. So I want to take a moment here, take a breath here, and not dive straight into spending these funds until we get a better idea of what's available and where the gaps are. I can let you know that the mini grant program and the Healthy Business Initiative, the mini grant program alone provided more money to our businesses than the entire county program. So we are definitely in a huge gap in stepping into that gap with the funds that the council has approved. Lastly, the additional assistance is really around inventory, equipment, exit strategies, evictions. So similar to housing, businesses will be evicted once the courts open up. What that looks like, we don't know, but we are preparing for exit strategies, pivots, legal assistance. Now, legal assistance is extremely costly. However, we've reached out to the Bar Pro Bono Legal program. Specifically, there is one in DC that is able to give businesses kind of an understanding of what to do next. And that is free legal advice. So again, recognizing that this is money that we need for the entire year, we want to make sure we know what the next steps are and where the other funding is coming from. Lastly, workforce development. So there was a $25,000 allotted for workforce development. And working through housing, we've been able to leverage the community grants program. And within that community grants program, there are a number of grantees who have programs that include workforce development. So with that said, we are already granting new partners the opportunity to assist us with workforce development. And these are new partners outside of our WorkSource Montgomery partner. With that said, these partners will be doing needs assessments to really get a good idea of what's needed by our residents when it comes to challenges of getting and keeping employment. So the types of things we will pay for, what you see here around certification, coaching, counseling, job readiness, but those funds also will not be spent until much later in the year and the beginning of 21. The Healthy Business Program. So just to give you an understanding of what the grant program is, the Healthy Business Initiative really was a 4-point plan that included everything from the Tacoma Park Streetery to our small business mini grant, our Healthy Business Grant Program, our cleaning and disinfecting program, and then finally our public health signage, which is also much more costly than you would have thought from the beginning of this conversation that we had in May. So we've received about 61, 57 of those applicants were eligible. We always get a great reminder that our neighbors in need are in need too, as in we get applicants from DC, from Silver Spring, that are not eligible. We have evaluated, it's a 4-person team. We've evaluated on our Likert scale the top need that fit the criteria. And with that said, about 38 of those can be awarded. Again, in order to award all of the folks who are in that first round, we're looking to spend about another $10,000 to $11,000. But those businesses, those applicants represent 430 people, 430 employees. We often talk about businesses as if they're separate entities. These are people whose jobs come from these businesses. Our businesses in Takoma Park are stalwart businesses. The average years in business is 14 years, and the estimated need is about $250,000, and that was for all of the applicants. So for all of our eligible applicants, their stated need came to about $250,000. So the Healthy Business Grant Program, let me identify the needs. These were the 5 things that are eligible to spend the funds on. PPE, cleaning supplies, COVID testing for owners and employees, equipment and supplies for pivots and operational changes, and then other. I really want to draw your attention to the 2 things that cost the most, PPE and cleaning supplies. And if you can imagine, of the entire 61 applicants, 51 of those folks said PPE and cleaning supplies were top priority, and then additional equipment to kind of re-operationalize, to get started back up, to buy things that they never used before, for example, takeout containers, and discovering just around every corner that there's a new equipment or need. Now, I just want to be clear about this graph that you see here. The applicants were told to select everything that they needed. So it wasn't like they could take, just select one thing. So this really does give a good picture around the business needs and what they wanted to spend the money on. The last
Gaines, I just want to check on the time check.
Okay,
Okay,
great, thank you. The last piece here is really about the other. We had a number of things listed for other, including people who were moving their entire business operations to provide for more space. But the most interesting piece there is that people were still asking for rent support, and rent support is not a part of the Healthy Business Grant Program. So that is something that we should keep in mind. Moving forward, to let the council know who is applying for these grants and where they're coming from. So this is just a breakdown of our city location here. You see about half are coming from the old Takoma Business Association, and the other half is coming from the Crossroads Development Authority. But you also see that there's a few businesses on Flower and Erie, and even one of the very few businesses on Sligo. Of the folks who applied, just about half had never received any funds from us at all. So we are tracking who received the mini grant before and who's asking for money now, and it's about an even split. Here are some more demographics, and I know that the council was very interested in the demographics of our applicants. So you see the gender split here, with about 61 selecting woman as a gender. And you see the age of our business owners, which is interesting. We don't have a lot of 18 to 20-year-old businesses who are reaching out to us right now. And again, you can see that in the age of the businesses, the 14-year average. And then this piece here about physical disability and which business owners are struggling with additional things that may not come to our minds. Lastly, I'm going to wrap up and talk about race, because at this point, we really are concerned about how the coronavirus, the COVID-19 emergency, the global pandemic is affecting people of color, and in particular, African-American people. With that said, it transfers straight into our business owners. Now, what you see here is a very good representation of what our city looks like. we have a city that is majority Black and Brown communities of color. And with that said, you'll see that our business owners who applied are also touching in just about, similar ways, higher in a few areas, the racial demographics of our city. So I am happy to say that our outreach is working when it comes to race equity. And with that said, I will close out and stop sharing and offer some time for questions.
Thank you so much. I think if the council members want to raise their hand, I know Ms. Wiggins has another meeting this evening, and I just want to remind folks we do have another presentation after this. First, thank you very much for that presentation. I know it will be available on the city website so that we can go back to it again. Let's see, I have Councilmember Smith first.
Thank you guys for the presentations. I appreciate it. Just want you to know that I support everything that you guys are doing. If you guys need any more resources, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself and the rest of the council. I'll be brief with my questions. I kind of have a sense of what you guys have been doing. Ms. Wiggins, on the eviction process, have you got any sense from the courts if the judges will issue bench decisions rather than having, because there's so many cases, rather than having the landlord and the tenant actually appear in court? Or will the process that has been going on, normally for a hearing between a landlord and tenant, will that be how things will go forward until we can get rid of the backlog?
So I think that's a really great question, Councilmember Smith. So our partners at Maryland Legal Aid will be in court and they will be available to consult, advise, and possibly be retained by tenants who are facing eviction on the day of court. The court has already identified that they're only going to see a limited number of cases and hear a limited number we'll have a limited number of litigants in the courthouse and in the courtroom per week. And so they already anticipate, at least based on what I've heard, they anticipate that it will take some time to get through the full breadth of the cases that have already been filed and the ones that kind of were filed before the health emergency. And so there's been a strong push to have landlords and tenants attempt to settle their disputes regarding dollars. And so the county is going to be really instrumental in that, but they were always involved. If a tenant came to court on a failure to pay rent and the judge identified a need, they would make a referral to the county. And so it's going to take a really long time. And so the courts, I think, have realized, based on what I've learned, that they want to try to settle as many of these cases as possible. They just don't have the manpower to adjudicate these cases. And let me just add something that's really important. There is a CARES Act disclosure that must be filed with many of these cases, identifying whether or not the basis for non-payment of rent is directly related to COVID-19. So the courts have already said if landlords are not submitting those forms, in many cases with the failure to pay rent case, they're going to be thrown out. So they're going to, there's a strong protection that the judiciary has put in place to ensure that folks aren't being evicted wrongfully. And if you follow the news, you'll see that many jurisdictions that have kind of phased in earlier than us, there've been a lot of wrongful evictions of folks who should never have been evicted. And if people are interested, I'll just put a plug in for the eviction project at Princeton University. Matthew Desmond, the author of Eviction or Evicted, is following this very closely state by state. And so if there are folks on this a part of this meeting that want to learn more about what's happening across the states, please check out the Eviction project at Princeton.
I appreciate it. My concern is I don't want the same type of situation that happened during the Great Recession when lenders were throwing people out of their homes when they did not necessarily have the power to do that.
So
Uh,
we're paying attention to that. And even if we get a whiff that someone is being illegally evicted, or what's called a constructive eviction, where the landlord changes the locks or puts things out, we have a pipeline to free legal providers that are willing to jump in immediately to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I feel really confident about that not happening in our community.
All right, thank you very much. And Samira, Ms. Cook-Gaines, quickly, you mentioned that supplies are available to the people that have applied for assistance. What about those businesses that haven't applied? Can they get these type of discounts or any type of discount that's available that your department has negotiated with these vendors? Is that something that's possible?
So that's why there's a need for a second round. And again, we plan to take a breath after this round, assess, figure out who's missing. The Healthy Business Initiative has a really strong focus on businesses that are seeing customers and clients. So storefront businesses is really that, and health offices, of course. So for us, they can apply on the second round. Montgomery County did a PPE negotiated kind of price, which did not work very well. Many of these businesses are becoming PPE suppliers for the first time, and their supplies are also being being compromised by scarcity. So yes, businesses we have not reached can still come back around for the Healthy Business Initiative. We will have another round that will open toward the end of this month, actually. And today is the day that the county has opened their version of our Healthy Business Initiative, where folks are able to get reimbursed up to $5,000 for things like PPE. So again, just making sure we have the right timeline on this, and we will do additional outreach for the businesses that we have not seen come through just yet.
Okay, thank you. I just want to end by saying I appreciate everything that the two of you guys have done. I know this is really difficult work. You read the Wall Street Journal, New York Times every day. The problems that Black and brown businesses, Black and brown folks in this country that are having because of this virus, because of the pandemic, is just heartbreaking. Number of Black and brown businesses that are just closed, that are shuttering completely, is unbelievable. We've never seen these type of numbers before. So I appreciate it. I know you guys are working hard hours. I know that we don't have a lot of extra staff that is helping you. So thank you for everything that you guys have done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Searcy.
Good evening, and thank you. I want to echo Councilmember Smith's appreciation for all of the hard work that you all are doing. One of the things that I would like to make sure that we're able to do, I recognize, particularly on the housing side, it takes us a little time to see what's going to happen in terms of the courts opening back up. But I would love to get a revised estimate from you all, preferably when we start talking about in October, the items that are on our hold list and kind of where we need to reallocate funds. So if you all could come back to us with increased estimates for what needs to be, where we need to add funds, that would be extremely helpful. I would want to see if we could add a line item regarding support to for rents for businesses, and to see whether or not there may be possibilities for us to offer some rental or lease assistance for some of those businesses that have not been able to open. Another quick point, I've heard that there's some, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback. I've heard that there's some confusion, that some people struggle with understanding how to complete things like unemployment applications in order to get unemployment benefits or SNAP benefits. Has our contractor been working with residents, particularly those that are experiencing hardships with paying their rents, to kind of make sure that they're signed up for the appropriate programs in order to get assistance?
Yeah, so I think I'm the only one that can start that conversation. So let me jump in quickly and say that for unemployment, folks that have either been denied or there's been some issue with unemployment benefits, we've given them two strong resources. One is Washington Lawyers Committee, the Workers' Rights Division, and also the Asian Pacific American Legal Rights Center. Those are lawyers that are working on a hotline every day, and they have been since April, providing direct assistance. Now, that's a very specialized area. And initially that was a troubleshooting, like what's going on? Why can't I get into the portal? Because that was like the biggest problem. It was, State of Maryland Department of Labor, they A, did not have the capacity, and B, did not have the appropriate portal to deal with it. We've seen those cases kind of drop down a little, but I will say this, Councilmember Searcy, the reason why we work so hard on the front end to get a reliable partner is that we knew it would be a barrier to getting help with anything else with back rent. So I've since gotten phone calls from social workers at the county who've said, can you help this person? We can't help them with back rent until we know that they've applied for unemployment. And for many of our families, they either can't get through the portal, and what I will emphasize in my final moments before you is, you think, or I'm saying generally, you think it's easy because you have a computer at home. Many of our families are struggling with technology in a serious way. They either don't have the bandwidth or they don't have the technology to even begin the process. And what I've heard from residents, interestingly enough, is they just stay on the phone for 2 hours waiting for someone to pick up the phone at the Department of Labor or another resource. And, what can I say? Don't stay on the phone, because that is the difference between them getting a benefit and not getting a benefit. As for SNAP, we have a very strong partner in the Test Center, which sits right at Flower and Piney Branch. We have a very deep relationship with them, including Sharon and Maureen, who are the leaders of that entity. They are helping people apply for SNAP. In addition, my office has provided SNAP brochures that have been included in the PTA outreach, so that folks, as they are preparing for to get shelf-stable food and fruits and veggies, we want to get people on SNAP, and I cannot say this enough. Food pantries and food outreach are not going to be enough to stabilize our families anywhere. The monies that come through the USDA and through our SNAP program are sustainable dollars. We want to get as many families on that program as we can, because in the long run, we want to make sure that people, A, have those, that they're not food insecure, and number two, that they have a steady stream of money that can go towards food. And the last part about that is the dollars that they get on their EBT card go directly into businesses, and those dollars are then pipelined directly into our small and large businesses. So, I can say this forever, but the SNAP program is super significant. And although I love our outreach and our partners that do food distribution, that is not a long-term strategy for resolving the issues of food insecurity. And so I think we've covered a lot of the needs. Health insurance, the Test Center will do that. CHEER will also do that. We have a Long Branch Partners Yahoo group that meets every week, where we're constantly talking about what the needs look like for our families. And the Test Center, I will just share, they have a multilingual staff. I work very closely with the Amharic, the Spanish, and other language caseworkers. because we want to make sure that there are no barriers to people moving forward with those programs. So I'll take a breath there.
Great, thank you so much. That's really, really helpful. And again, I want to echo that it would be extremely helpful for us to revisit those numbers, as well as I know the Deputy City Manager has been keeping track of, and we've started to see some reimbursements from FEMA in terms of the work that we're doing related to COVID. I think one of the things that's important, and this is for those that may be listening, is that we have to be mindful of making sure that the areas that we're working in, that we're not necessarily duplicating programs or work that rightfully the county is doing and being reimbursed for. So it's a delicate dance that we're kind of playing in order to provide residents and businesses with the resources that they need, while at the same time trying to navigate federal and county and state programs that are becoming available. So look forward to having an additional conversation with you all in October, where we can kind of revisit some of these numbers and reassess where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Kovar.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate the staff presentations. There was a lot of useful information there. One of my concerns, and this does relate sort of to comments that my two colleagues who spoke previously also referred to, it does seem as if, and for example, in the Healthy Business program is one example where the need appears to outstrip the amount of funding that we have available, and the same thing may end up ultimately being true in terms of rental assistance, depending on what happens with the evictions. I understand that the Maryland Attorney General, Brian Frosh, is pushing for the evictions to be delayed until January 31st, which would be helpful. But I don't want us to be in a position where, since we have set aside the additional funds, the so-called hold category in our budget, and obviously there are a number of different purposes that money could be used for. But if the allocation is available, say for something like rental assistance or for the Healthy Business program, isn't sufficient for the number of either residents or businesses in the community that we want to help, we need to be able to know that on the council, so then we can decide if we want to look at making some shifts. And by the same token, I think at least Ms. Cook-Gaines, you mentioned that on a couple of the pots of money that have been set aside, including workforce development, I think if I remember correctly, you're suggesting that money be just kept on hold for a while until we see what the needs are. And I understand that, but also I want to make sure again that we're not going to be in a position where that money is on hold and may not even be able to be used until next year, while at the same time we might have some more immediate needs now in terms of the Healthy Business grants that could benefit from that. So what will the process be for us to be informed going forward, and potentially even during the next month or so when the recess is on, to understand where we're falling short, so that if necessary, we can look at making sure there's a possibility of shifting some of the funds. I know that's a long question, but I think it's fundamental.
Councilmember Kovar, I think I can address that. I think we certainly are looking at this on a weekly basis. As was mentioned, the Deputy City Manager keeps track of funds that can be reimbursed. And I will say that nobody is shy about asking for, letting me know when more money is needed. And so we'll be, if there's something that's very urgent, we'll bring that to you at any time. But I think in the fall, we'll have a much better discussion. One of the things I really appreciate about staff is that they also look at timing and balance and gaps, because we certainly can't pay for everything, all the need. The question is, what can we do that saves something, that is at a timely point, so that it's a bridge funding, that kind of thing. And all that will be shared with you. If there's something urgent, we'll let you know immediately, even when you're on recess. But certainly in the fall, we'll have a lot more information.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I do think that just based on the presentations, it seems like it's easier in some ways to quantify the small business needs than maybe it is for the residents' needs, because it's a specifically knowable sort of population of businesses, and we can see what their needs are in a more.
That's true, but it's also the timing that we're at, where we can, the help for residents actually mostly comes a little bit later.
Right.
And so part of that is the timing.
But it does seem as if we're more likely to see a substantial amount of funding potentially coming from the county to help with renters. But obviously, saying that we're potentially going to try to help 250 renters or renters' families, I mean, that's great, but that's clearly not going to be enough to cover the whole need. And so I just want to underline how important it's going to be for us to be informed at whatever point if the need outstrips what we've allocated, because we do have additional funds on hold, and or the money can be shifted from within the fund now.
That's right.
So, I mean, for example, and I would like to just ask Samira one last question. I mean, do we have a sense whether some businesses, or how many we just think may not make it, even with what we're talking?
Well, I can give you the national number. I can give you the national number and let you know that there's an estimated 40% of small and micro businesses that will not make it, specifically small and micro businesses. Our city is made up of small and micro businesses. So with that said, that's the scary number, to think that half of the businesses that you see on the street won't be there. I do think that moreover, it'll be the businesses that you don't see on the street. So people will miss the ice cream shop, they will miss the wine bar, and they will rally around those folks. But there are quite a few people that fall into categories that you don't see in storefronts. They work from home, et cetera. And we're really working hard to kind of touch those folks. But that's the scary number. The scary number is 40% of small and micro businesses. I do not think that Tacoma Park, especially since we have really established a level of communication during this pandemic that we've never had with our businesses, I do not think that we are going to fare that same fate. I am also an optimist. So with that said, I do think that the continued communication, the fact that our council is very involved in connecting our city staff to businesses the minute they find out somebody needs something or they hear something. So being a close-knit, I think, is going to be a part of our small businesses, kind of safety net.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. We have Councilman Costick, Dabala, and then myself. So I hope Ms. Wiggins can just hang on for, I know she has another.
Yeah, I know. And we also have our other presentation.
I know. I'm trying to move us along. Councilman Costick.
Thank you very much. I will try to be brief. I want to, first of all, reiterate the huge amount of thanks to both of you and all of your staff for the really important work that you're doing. And also for taking a moment during this crisis mode when you're just reacting as quickly as you can to also working hard to be strategic about how you're doing it, as well as pulling together these metrics and really taking the time to explain it to us, because I know it's hard when you're in the midst of it all to do that, but I think this has been an extremely helpful presentation and I really want to thank you for it. I just have two kind of brief things I want to toss out. I know they're bigger discussions than we can have right now. One is something I haven't heard a lot about in the discussion today is childcare. And this touches on a lot of the issues that we're talking about in terms of workforce, people being able to work, being able to find jobs if they lose their jobs, being able to pay their rent and all of those other things. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on what can be done, what needs to be done, especially knowing, looking ahead to the school year. We know school will not be in person in the fall. And I'm wondering if there's more that can be done at the city level on those things.
Casey, I would love to answer that question. I have been having continued conversations and meetings with our daycare providers in the city. There are 21 licensed daycares in our city. In our last meeting, we actually had our city manager kind of hear from and talk with the daycare providers. In addition to that, prior to, as I was building the Healthy Business Initiative, I took the input of our daycare providers. So when I say that round two is something where we absolutely need to and want to have of that Healthy Business Initiative, it's imperative because at the time when we were establishing the Healthy Business Initiative, there were only 2 daycares open. And again, I said there are 21 licensed daycare providers. That includes home daycares and the bigger child development centers. So with that said, yes, we are definitely in conversation with them. The Healthy Business Initiative will absolutely be a grant that is good for them to kind of target. I will say the county grant that came out specifically for childcare providers was one that was only if you were able to open by August 31st. So we have childcare providers that were not ready, were not comfortable. The fact that the schools weren't open also gave them pause on wanting to take on that risk. So moving forward, we are still in constant contact with them. Additionally, our city TV, we really want to kind of get the conversation about daycare out there. And our city TV folks will be actually doing a video interview of our daycare providers who are open, those who are not open and why, and just kind of talk about how they're preparing themselves to receive their clients, their children and families as we move into the school year. So there will be some video, there'll be several ways to communicate that they really identified for us. They wanted to get the message out about what's happening with daycares in Takoma Park. And this is another way. So, we think about things like who's getting money and being able to buy it, but leveraging a resource like City TV and our and the staff there is going to actually be really helpful, I think, for just letting the rest of the community know what's going on.
And Councilmember Costick, we're also looking at a survey that would go out to the public about childcare needs.
That's great. Good. Thank you very much. I know we're very limited on time, so I don't need an answer for this right now. But the other thing I was just thinking about was briefly, we discussed the need for technical assistance and connectivity. And I would just like in the future to hear a little more about how we can assist with that. And I know there are a lot of residents who are in a position where they have time because they're retired and they're at home and they are interested in volunteering, or people who might be in a better financial situation right now who have reached out to me periodically and said, I want to help out. How can I do that? So if there are ways that we can help connect people with the needs that there are and make sure that what they're doing is the most effective and targeted at those specific needs, I would love to think through that as well. Thank you again.
Thank you. Councilwoman Dybala.
Yes, thank you. Samira and Grace, thank you so much. And thanks to your teams for working so very hard. Necessary work, difficult work, and thank you very much. Very impressive. I have 3 questions on housing for Ms. Wiggins. I'll make them very quick, and only one of them perhaps we need right now. For residents who might be listening and want to reach out to housing to find out what assistance may be available, who do they call? What number?
So they should go to housing@tacomaparkmd.gov. That's our email, housing@tacomaparkmd.gov. And then they can always reach out to our main number here, which is 301-891-7119, and that's our that they will leave a message, and we have staff that are kind of channeling those calls to the appropriate person. So yeah, please reach out. We get about 8 to 10 phone calls a day. new phone calls, not like repeats. And so there's been a lot of activity, but we're not seeing everybody.
Thank you. The second and third question you mentioned, in passing, you mentioned outreach, and Ms. Cook Gaines specifically said that she's made connections and outreach to businesses, small businesses in our community in a way that hasn't happened before. I know that to be true also on the renters and the small landlord side. So at some point, I'd like to hear a little follow-up on what's worked, because you've been doing a lot of new and innovative things to reach out.
I would like to bring some small landlords to our council at the next presentation, because we've done some really very intense intervention with very scared landlords that are afraid that they're going to lose their housing, their rental property, and we've had some terrific success. So I'd love to do that.
Great. And finally, you briefly mentioned needs for technology and literally bandwidth. And again, in October, perhaps you can come back with some suggestions about whether there's anything that the city with our limited resources can do about that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I just have a couple of questions. I want, again, just iterate my thanks to all of you for your work on this. I won't reiterate what's been said. I agree with all my colleagues, and I look forward to coming back to this when we come back for recess. A couple of things I'd ask for is, I know that the deputy city manager, with the help of most of the staff, put together an excellent report that we shared with the county council. I don't know, was it a month ago? It feels like 2 years ago right now. But I think it provides a good outline, and perhaps we could just update that for the next time the council comes back, because I think it provides a good structure for talking about many of the issues we raised today and providing some of the data that council members are looking for. So I asked, like, at the appropriate time, maybe that could get filled in with new numbers for mid to late September, if that would make sense. In addition, I have found it very helpful to send to residents and to provide them with information about what we are doing regarding COVID-19 and our response. The other thing I'd like, in addition to everything my colleagues have raised, to consider over the next couple of weeks on need is I met Monday afternoon with Delegate Charkoudian and members of Impact Silver Spring, who have been helping to bring together a group of women who live on Maple Avenue, many of them Ethiopian immigrants, talking about the needs that they have. I know, Ms. Wiggins, you know many of them and have been helping them. There still is, even given many of the conversations you and I have had with them, a great deal of confusion around how to apply for things, the difference between what they can apply for in the city and the county. And so just as we go through these things, thinking about what systems, if we need some other systems to put in place to provide information to people, to get assistance, and if there's any additional assistance you need, particularly in housing, to meet that need. So I think it was a very good conversation, and I hope to follow up with them again. And I wish I had you on the phone. I wasn't exactly sure what the agenda for the meeting was going to be.
Next time.
Because I know you could have answered their questions much better than I did. But I know they're going to follow up with us. And so I just want to say, add my thanks to everyone else's. And I look forward to continuing the conversation and hearing about your good work. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart.
Great.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Now maybe we can move on to the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right.
I know
our
Ms.
next
Grisby
presentation-
has had to sign off, but others, Jamie and Alex, let's turn it over to Jamie, I think.
Yes, I think we're turning to Jeannie for the to do the intro on the assessment of park quality, accessibility, and use.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So Alex, our planning intern, will be presenting his ongoing work and research on public space and racial equity. This includes an assessment of park amenities and park quality, along with a demographic analysis and proximity analysis of access to the city's park space. This effort involved a substantial amount of data collection that we didn't previously have, and Alex has been working very diligently on this since last fall. This work assists in the city's development of a public space management plan, which we've spoken to about a couple times now, and aids in the development of a needs assessment along with an updated inventory of the city's assets within park space and public space. The underlying objective of this work is to help provide the city and the city council with empirical data and the tools that we need to aid in the decision-making process around parks and public space in the city. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alex. Following his presentation, he can answer any questions that you have, and I will also be here to answer questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I'll share my screen now and see if we can get started. Computer's a little slow. Okay, great. So this is an assessment of park quality, race, and accessibility in Tacoma Park. And I should note that these are some preliminary findings. This is still a work in progress. So we're continually working to improve this in any way that we can. So I'm going to go over an overview real quick. We're going to cover some background information and objectives, a park assessment that was completed, the incorporation of racial demographics, distance matrix analysis and results, and then some next steps. So this analysis contributes to the development of the public space management plan, and we really wanted to have empirical data to inform decision-making, which was up to this point not available. So in 2016, a park inventory assessment was completed, but it didn't consider the quality or the condition of amenities. Previously, assessments of public space in Tacoma Park have also not incorporated racial demographics or measured proximity. This project also falls in overall alignment with Council's priorities for the step in the process and the public space management plan that is a livable community for all and an environmentally sustainable community as well. So the city did not have documentation of the location or quality of parks and amenities up to this point, and we also did not have any quantifiable measure for proximity to parks within the city. So some objectives were to determine the quality of parks within the city and their distribution of park amenities. We wanted to identify the distribution of parks in terms of racial demographics throughout the city. And we wanted to determine how well the city meets the national standard of all residents living within a quarter of a mile or 10-minute walk of a park, and that's from the American Planning Association and the National Recreation and Parks Association. So the first part of this was the park amenity data collection. And this process started in February of this year. And it used a couple of different pieces of software. So one was an app called Collector. And then there's GIS software by ArcGIS that was also used for this. The Collector app was used to gather information on park amenities such as playground equipment, basketball hoops, benches, picnic tables, pavilions, a lot of other objects as well. And data collection was pretty extensive and thorough in its process and used to evaluate park amenities and their location. So this was done through the app with up to 5-foot accuracy. In addition, the notes and photos were able to be attached to items that were in more questionable condition. So in order to gain a better understanding of what types of parks are out there, we decided to classify and grade parks differently based on potential park use. And so we characterized them into two different categories. One was active parks. And these are parks that have amenities that engage people, such as playgrounds, those basketball hoops, picnic pavilions. And the other type is passive parks. And passive parks primarily serve as green space without amenities. And maybe there's a bench, maybe there's a couple trash cans or something. But we wanted to not only know where parks were located in the city, but also know what types of amenities and overall quality was out there, so that this could be better evaluated and that we can understand their distribution. And so the parks were graded kind of differently, as I said before, based on how we classified them. So the grading scale consisted of 3 different categories. One was landscape features, so the natural landscape, how was the quality of that? How was the quality of the structural features? So any of the amenities that I've kind of listed already. And then the third category was cleanliness, and how clean is the park? How much litter is there relative to the size of the park? How clean does it look? And for active parks, all 3 of these characteristics were evaluated. And then for passive parks, they don't really have any structural features. So we decided to not include a grade for structural features for passive parks. And out of that, total scores for each park were created out of a total score of 100. So there were 32 parks that are located in the city, and 20 are city-owned and 12 are county-owned. And the average total score for all parks in the city was calculated to be around 73 out of 100. 2 parks were given a total score of 100, and then 8 of those parks fell below the average, 5 of those being city-owned and 3 of those being county-owned. So after the data collection was completed for the park quality assessment, I was able to create an interactive web map, which can be viewed at this link here. And this allows you to kind of view park amenities individually and to see how they were assessed. So taking kind of a look here at that interactive web map, on the right-hand side, you'll see a legend, and you can zoom in to different types of parks or different park features, and you can click on them and interact. So if we zoom into Jackson Boyd Park here, this is a city-owned park, and as you can probably guess, this park was classified as an active park. It has multiple types of playground equipment. It has hopscotch benches, picnic tables, a pavilion, among other things. And this park scored quite high with a total score of around 92. So as previously stated, you can click on individual amenities and view images and notes to each of these amenities as well. It is an interactive map, and it's available to the public. So I do encourage you to take a look. Next, I'll talk about census data and the size of data that we are using. So census block group level data is the most fine-tuned geographic data available on demographics in Takoma Park. And there are a total of 14 block groups in Takoma Park. The black line shown here represents the city boundary. And it's worth noting that the block groups don't line up perfectly with the wards or the city boundary for that matter. The northernmost block group, for example, extends beyond the city boundary, but because a significant amount is located within the city, we chose to include it in the race and proximity analysis portion of this project. So next, we're going to talk about the incorporation of racial demographics. Racial demographics were data was gathered from census at the block group level. And this data breaks out, race, all different categories of race. So for this part of the study, categories of white and people of color were highlighted to identify impacts on minority populations. Race data was then overlapped with park quality data, and we did this to kind of determine if gaps exist, and also to see how parks were distributed in terms of racial demographics. So here's a map on the racial demographic data at the block group level, and it's overlaid with parks. And for the legend here, we've chosen to select percent white as the kind of defining characteristic. So this data is broken down by individual racial groups. And I do want to point out that we're not deliberately centering white here. We can break it down for each racial group based on census data for a more detailed understanding. This is just for visualization purposes. That's what we've selected to get the, I guess, greatest contrast between, here's the white population. Here are more diverse populations based on the block group level. So for the next portion of the project, I worked with a mapping software company called Mapbox to conduct a proximity analysis. Prior to conducting this analysis, we could kind of see where parks were located relative to racial demographics, but we didn't have empirical measures for their distance or proximity. And the aim of this analysis was to provide us with a more concrete data to evaluate the actual distance of parks within the city based on street networks and city right-of-way. So previously we could visually observe the relative park distribution, but we didn't really have a real measure of access. And so here I'm going to kind of just break down as best I can some of the steps that went into this analysis. So first and foremost, using Google Street View, park entrance locations were identified. Then 100 random generated points were generated within each block group. And this represents the potential starting locations by which people would be leaving to go to a park. Next, all these points were put into a Mapbox matrix through their software at the block group level. And this measured the distance from all random points to all park entrance points. From there, I calculated the average walking distance time, or average walking time in minutes. So if this is from any location in each individual block group to all parks throughout the city. So here's going to be a little bit of a visual aid to kind of help you out as we go through this process. So the yellow dots generated represent any location where someone could enter a park. So those are the closest entrance points by which somebody could first step into a park. And some of them have 3 or 4 locations, and some of them only have 1. So next, we broke down the block groups and divided them up so that they could be assessed individually. And then 100 random points were generated within each block group. And again, these points represent potential starting locations from which somebody would potentially leave to access a park. So using the Mapbox software, we were able to calculate walking time from block groups to parks. The darker colors indicate further walk time, and the lighter colors indicate closer walk time or less walk time. It's important to note that this is the average distance to all parks within the city. So again, the northernmost block group is slightly outside the city boundary. So it's probably, while that number is a little high, the portion that's in the city is probably more likely to be around the number. I think it's 27.2 there on the far east side. So we can also view this data in other ways. For example, we can determine the minimum time it takes to get from a block group to an active park. And, for example, block group 031, the closest active park is 6.6 minutes away, and that's Tobacco Lily Neighborhood Park. And then from block group 013, the minimum time to get to an active park is 4.5 minutes, and that's to Spring Park. So here we can add a layer for playground equipment. And this just indicates an example of the amenities that were tracked. And this can be used as a basis for further evaluations, such as proximity to parks with playgrounds or other amenities that we can determine. It really kind of brings the whole project in full circle, combining data from the first portion of this project with the data of the last portion of this project. So, yeah. So we now have data to better inform priority locations and improvements, which was not previously available before. This creates a more transparent process, and the data helps to inform the development of the public space management plan and also highlights critical areas. So some next steps, we'd like to complete interactive maps with the data from each section on this project and enhance the web page. We want to identify priority and critical areas for future investments, for park improvements, or for new parks to advance council's goals. We want to design creative multi-purpose uses for city public space, and we want to develop public engagement and virtual meetings for public space management plan. So with that, I can take any questions. If you would like to look over this information, or if you would like me to send you anything, you can feel free to email me at this address available. And for additional information, you can find that on the city's website under the Public Space Management Plan page. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Alex. That was terrific. One quick question. The interactive maps aren't up yet, right, on the city website? Am I correct about that?
I don't think actually, Jamie, do you know? I'm not sure if the one for the park amenities is up there or not yet.
The one for the park amenities is up, but the
up.
rest of them are not are still being updated, so they're not on the website yet.
Okay.
But they will be up shortly.
The park amenities one through the link in this presentation as well.
Okay, great. Well, I just want to say thank you. This is an awesome presentation. And work, Alex and Jamie, thank you so much for doing this. I can't wait to get on the maps and start looking at them. And I'm sure my colleagues feel the same way. This is a great use of data and breaking down the amenities in our city. I'm going to turn it over first to Councilman Kostick and then CRC.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am on the same page as you, Mayor Stewart. I absolutely can't wait to dig into these maps. This is great. Thank you very much. I can see this being incredibly useful for us as we're looking at racial equity and prioritizing where our funds go and how we look at different projects. I don't need an answer to these particular things right now. I'm sure they're difficult to do, but it occurred to me that it would be awesome, a pie in the sky, to be able to also cross-reference a couple of other things. One of them being multifamily buildings, because people who live in multifamily buildings don't have as much access to outdoor space as people who live in a single family home. And then secondarily, going a little bit beyond, and I don't know whether actually the technology you used took this into account or not, but going beyond just walk time to a walkability score in terms of, even if you only live a block away from a park, if you have to cross New Hampshire Avenue to get to it, that's not a park that's particularly accessible to a young family, for example. So I'd love to think through those things a little more and see what might be a good option or opportunities to incorporate those. And then I mean, future, obviously, once you do something, you want to expand on that. In future, I would love to have something like this for our traffic calming and our new sidewalks. I would love to be able to have that sort of racial equity data and the mapping and be able to look at it in such a holistic way. That's just exactly what we need. So my main question is just when can we expect next steps on the public space management study and what that process looks like in timeline?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of updating, you know, getting the maps online and making those accessible, definitely the first big step. In terms of actually like maybe expanding on this, so we did have to pay Mapbox, I guess, in order to run the analysis. So if we were to, for example, try to do it again using different information or different data, or if we want to break it down in a different way, we'd have to go through their service again. In terms of the rest of the public space management plan, Jamie, I'm not sure if maybe you know.
Yeah, I can answer some of that. I mean, our next steps were to do public outreach. That was a little bit delayed due to COVID, but once the maps are all up on the website, in the next month or so, we wanted to I'm developing a survey to get feedback on the priorities that I presented to you a couple months ago. And then once the maps are finalized, we'd like to present those for public comment as well to see if there are any gaps that we missed, talk about the walkability score, talk about the walkability distance that was developed, whether that's accurate for people's experiences or not. So those are the larger next steps for the public space management plan. And then Councilwoman Kostick mentioned adding multifamily units to the map. That is certainly something we can do. We have a layer for that. So to visualize where the multifamily buildings are located in relation to public space is something we can add to the map as well.
Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Searcy.
Sorry, I'm having muting issues. Thank you so much for this presentation. I just want to echo my colleagues in the excitement that I have in terms of ways in which we may be able to use this data. One of the things that I would encourage you all to do, because I know that sometimes when we have contracts with people, there is a desire to force you to come back for their services. But I would encourage us to try to figure out a way in which we can leverage, because in reality, it seems like the bulk of the work that Mapbox really did was try to pinpoint the walkability to the actual park entrances, and everything else is done in ArcGIS. So I think the key is to get our data from them that you can then put into ArcGIS, and then all of the other data points that we're interested in, it would be another layer that you can code into the GIS, you know what I mean? So that might be something to follow up with your contractor about, so that there's some longevity to being able to manipulate this data that's not reliant on us renewing like a $3,000 contract. So that's just a tip I've learned over the years. Another thing that I just want to make sure that I understand is, you know, it seemed as if, did we include county parks and playgrounds as a layer, correct? To kind of piggyback off of Councilmember Kostick, there is some data regarding the latest playground score for those county playgrounds that might also be helpful to know. Not all county playgrounds are created equally, and so there may be some that are, I know in Ward 5, that are well beyond their lifespan or in desperate need of repair. So understanding the current state of those county playgrounds and their proximity to people, particularly people in the purple area, people of color that are already somewhat removed in terms of their location from those playgrounds, and the playgrounds that are available to them are not of quality, especially those county playgrounds. I think would be really, really useful and helpful for us to be able to try to code. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if that was available in the maps that you have. Michael, was it? I'm sorry, Alex, was it?
Yeah, the county parks definitely were included. If you're referring to the score,
The school.
yeah, that I am not aware of, or at least I didn't use it in my data. A lot of the data that I used, so I did have like the shape files for the county parks and the city parks, but I don't think there was any score attached to like the county parks. So all the scores that are on the interactive maps are scores that were pretty much created based on the criteria we created when we chose to go out and evaluate the parks.
Right.
Okay.
Councilmember Cersei, this is Jamie. I reached out to Montgomery Parks to ask them how often they conduct quality assessments, what their criteria was, so we're not recreating work that they've already done. They informed me that they conduct assessments only every 2 years, and those are typically just on parks that the park manager deems in the top 5 for renovation. The last one that was conducted in Tacoma Park was Tacoma Urban Park, and that was in March of 2019. They didn't have any other assessments to provide me with, and they don't plan to do any additional assessments in the future in Tacoma Park that are immediately planned. So that's why it was easier for us to just move forward and assess all of the parks at one time rather than wait on the county to assess them.
So I'll comb through my inbox, but I may actually have the latest scores when we were going back and forth with the county about Hillwood Manor. So there may be some data already where they had, when they did their last assessment, what score they gave that playground and when it is due to be kind of reevaluated for the purpose of their SIP project. So I think I have it in an email somewhere. I'm pretty sure the Director of Public Works was CC'd on those plethora of emails, and we could try to dig them up for you. You all can kind of overlay that data because that might be useful here too. But overall, I think it's a really good plan. One of the things that I also want to make sure that we're doing is the novel approach, or what's really important in terms of the open space management plan, it's not just taking inventory of what we have, but coming up with potential solutions for the disparities that we know exist. So we already know that there are a ton of disparities that exist in terms of access to public space and playgrounds. I think one of the things that I think is going to be really important in terms of the next steps in community engagement is how we are actually identifying potential approaches to achieving the goals that we've outlined previously. I think that was like in January. So that's the big thing that I would encourage you all to definitely try to make some moves on so that we can be in a better position to really try to come up with an action plan for how we will address the disparities that we know in terms of access to public space. But again, this is really, really interesting work, and thank you so much for doing it.
Councilmember Cersei, one of the things that I do want to note is that although we know stuff, we didn't have data. And so making sure that we have something so that we have some standards to see when we're making progress was important. I'd also like just to note that our intern isn't going to be staying here very much longer. And so part of what we have to do is determine how this project continues.
Great, thank you.
Great. Councilmember Smith.
Alex, Jamie, I want to thank you guys for working on this. It's a good project. You guys have done really good work here. My question is, have you put any surveys in the field to find out, especially in the primarily Black and Brown neighborhoods, if the actual users of the park are Black and Brown? I think that would be really interesting information, because just because a park is next to you, there might be a reason, a rationale why those Black and Brown residents don't take advantage of it.
I think that's going to be the next stage when we take this for the community surveys and that kind of thing. That's not been done yet.
Another question I have is, have you guys looked at were there any hypotheses that were established before going into this project and whether or not you found out they were supported, or you found an alternative hypothesis to some of this work?
Yeah. So just kind of looking at the overlay of the racial demographic data with the park data, we could kind of see that on the eastern end of the city, that those block groups definitely looked like they probably had not as great of access to parks. Another thing was kind of determining what quality of the parks they did have access to. And so doing the Mapbox analysis really definitely kind of helped to confirm and verify that those are the block groups with that are the furthest on average from parks within the city. So yeah, I think this analysis really did help to kind of verify our initial hypothesis that those were the ones with a lower degree of access.
Okay, good. So did you write a policy memo that states that? or is there anything that we could use other than the presentation itself that says just what you said?
So yeah, I do plan on writing a full report on this project, and I'll definitely be sure to say that sort of thing in there and mention that. I haven't gotten there just yet because the Mapbox analysis was done fairly recently. So yeah, just haven't gotten quite there yet.
Okay, great. Look forward to reading it. Another question, I know with Esri that you can use 3D images because I'm talking to them about my own capstone. Have you thought about plugging that into the maps that you provided us so we can get a better sense of how these images, or whether it's picnic tables, buildings, how do they work in the real world rather than it's just logos or icons?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I haven't actually messed around with 3D data on this project, but it's definitely something to look into. And yeah, maybe we could find some use from that.
Okay. All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, Alex, thank you again. This is for all of us data geeks out there. This is super cool. And we're and just in time for our recess. So added to the to-do list. Looking forward to when the maps are all up there so we can take a look at these. And thank you again. Do we know when your last day is at the city?
Yeah, it's August 20th.
Okay, so you're here for a little bit.
Yeah.
So we better start looking at that and sending you questions. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. Let's see, it's 6:55. Why don't we wrap up this session of our presentations and come back for our 7:30 meeting. That means council members try and get back a little bit before 7:30 so we can get everybody online and get started. So thank you again, and we'll see you all in a little bit.